Hello, hello. Welcome to Reading Time. My name's Time, and this week we're reading Tales from Shakespeare by Charles and Mary Lamb. Let's get to reading. Tales from Shakespeare is a collection of summaries of some of Shakespeare's best-known plays. There are summaries of mostly his tragedies and comedies, as Mary and Charles Lamb decided to leave out his historical plays. These summaries are written in prose as opposed to the style that you would usually see in a script. However, the wording is not entirely original. At times they do just quote directly from the play itself, especially in moments of dialogue. I'm going to give this book 5 stars, and this may be because I already enjoy Shakespeare, but I think that this book makes those stories more accessible to those who may struggle with the Shakespearean language, or those who may struggle with just reading a play instead of seeing it performed. Now, just like there is content to be aware of with Shakespeare's actual plays, there is content to be aware of with this book. It should be noted that this collection of Shakespeare's plays does tend to take out subplots from the stories and mostly sticks to the main plot lines. It also does not go into anything overtly sexual. Even so, there is still a lot of violence in the plays, as sometimes people are killed or murdered, and there are fight scenes. We also have people being poisoned and consuming substances. So there is still content to be aware of, and really I would recommend, instead of me diving into every single play individually, I would just recommend looking at a summary of the play or of the section in Tales from Shakespeare before having a younger reader read it. Now, this book was originally written for rather young audiences. However, the prose is still a little difficult to understand, I would say, for elementary school age students. And typically nowadays, at least in the American school system, we don't usually introduce Shakespeare until middle school. And so as such, I am also going to recommend this book for middle school age, so potentially 6th through 12th grade. Now, I don't believe I was actually introduced to Shakespeare's works until 7th grade, and we read A Midsummer Night's Dream. But really, whenever Shakespeare is introduced, I think that these summaries would be a very good way to make the writing more accessible and better understood by especially younger readers. I think I've found a lot of times when students are trying to read a play in any format, not just Shakespeare, they sometimes have a hard time keeping track of plot lines, and they get thrown off by the stage directions and stuff like that. And part of that is because plays are really meant to be watched and not just read. I think there's still value in reading them, and I'm not saying that everyone has a hard time with reading a play and understanding what's going on. However, I do think better understanding can come from seeing a play performed in front of you. So I think this book would be an especially good tie-in with teaching the actual plays, as just sort of a way to make sure that there is understanding. Now, something else that I think is just interesting with this book is its intended purpose, which, as I said, was for young children, but there's a little bit more beyond that, as we can see in the preface. I'm just going to read a little bit. So it says, "It has been wished to make these tales easy reading for very young children. To the utmost of their ability, the writers have constantly kept this in mind, but the subjects of most of them made this a very difficult task. It was no easy matter to give the histories of men and women in terms familiar to the apprehension of a very young mind. For young ladies, too, it has been the intention chiefly to write, because boys being generally permitted the use of their fathers' libraries at a much earlier age than girls are, they frequently have the best scenes of Shakespeare by heart, before their sisters are permitted to look into this manly book. And therefore, instead of recommending these tales to the perusal of young gentlemen who can read them so much better in the originals, their kind assistance is rather requested in explaining to their sisters such parts as are hardest for them to understand. It goes on to talk more about how this book is best suited for sisters, since their brothers likely already know the tales pretty well. And I just found that fascinating. Definitely not something that I would say is true today. I think students of all ages and backgrounds sometimes struggle with Shakespeare, and so I think this book could be beneficial to a lot of people. But I just thought that that was fascinating that they chose to write that in the preface, and I wonder how much of that comes from actual experience, because Charles and Mary Lamb were actually brother and sister. So I wonder if this was written in this way because Mary and Charles had experienced Shakespeare in that regard. So as I said, it's a 5-star book. It has marvelous summaries, and if you like Shakespeare, or even if you don't like Shakespeare, these stories are very valuable to know. Shakespeare is alluded to and referenced so often, even in popular media, that familiarizing oneself with the tales, I think, is beneficial to just better understanding the world around you. Now for the poster for this week, we are on this bottom row with this picture of Shakespeare for our Tales from Shakespeare. Let me know what you thought of Tales from Shakespeare in the comments below. I would also love to hear how you feel about Shakespeare in general. What's your favorite play by him? Mine is Hamlet. It has been for quite some time since I read it in high school, and will likely continue to be my favorite. Let me know also if you have any book recommendations. If you are not already, feel free to subscribe and follow me on either Facebook or Instagram for updates about what I'm reading and when my videos are posted. As always, I hope that you have a marvelous week and a wonderful read.